All right, so um, we're going to dive into smart buildings today. And you sent over a ton of stuff, research papers, technical documents, even some presentation slides.
Hmm.
And it looked like you're really interested in both like the actual tech that makes buildings smart,
Hmm.
but also like how do we measure that smartness, you know?
Right, exactly. And it's a really hot topic right now, especially with Europe's push for energy efficiency.
Hmm.
They want to have all buildings decarbonized by 2050.
2050, that seems far off, but that's like a huge goal.
It is. It's a big.
What kind of tech is even going to get us there?
Yeah. Well, that's where smart buildings come in, and that's why we need to understand things like the smart readiness indicator,
The SRI.
the SRI. Yeah.
Okay, so is that like kind of like when you buy an appliance and it has that energy performance sticker? Is it kind of like that for a building?
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Okay.
It's a way to measure how intelligent a building is,
Mm.
how well it can adapt to the people inside and the energy grid.
Mm.
And it's really gaining traction in Europe.
Yeah. So like if I was thinking about upgrading my office, like the SRI could help me figure out how to do that.
Absolutely. It can help you make really smart choices.
Okay.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty of what the SRI is and how it works, let's take a step back and define what a smart building even is.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like that can be a pretty broad term.
It is.
Like it's not just having a fancy thermostat or something, right?
Right. It's way more than that.
Yeah.
This smart building report that you sent over, it breaks it down into 3 layers.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost think about it like a cake.
The cake.
Yeah, so the bottom layer of the cake is what they call the building devices and solutions. So these like the sensors, the actuators, like all the gadgets, basically.
It's like those motion sensor lights that turn on and scare you every time you walk by.
Yeah, exactly. Or like a smart thermostat that learns your schedule and adjusts the temperature like when you're home or away.
Okay, got it. So what's the next layer of the cake?
All right, so the middle layer, that's what's called automation technologies.
Right.
So that's all the networking and software that allows those gadgets to talk to each other and work together.
So it's like the nervous system of the building.
Yes, exactly, like connecting all the different parts.
Cool.
And then at the top, the icing on the cake, we have the management control platform.
Oh, okay.
And this is like the brains of the building. It's analyzing data and making sure everything's running smoothly.
So it's like a building manager who never sleeps and is always looking for ways to optimize stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, super efficient.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and one of the sources you sent over this iReunion Community Smart Building Report, it highlights how Italy has actually been ahead of the curve in this whole building automation thing.
Oh, interesting. What have they been doing?
Well, for instance, they have this regulation called the DM Requisiti Minimi, and it requires all new non-residential buildings to have at least a Class B automation system.
So like they're setting a higher standard for new construction.
Right, they're pushing builders to incorporate smart tech from the get-go.
I see.
But the smart building report we have here, it also points out that it's not all smooth sailing.
Yeah, there's always challenges, right?
Always challenges.
What are some of the things they're highlighting?
Well, one thing they mentioned is that there can be delays in actually implementing these regulations, which is obviously frustrating for, everyone involved.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's also the whole issue of incentivizing building owners to make these upgrades.
Right, like they need to see the value in it.
Exactly. They need to see a return on their investment,
Hmm.
whether it's financial savings or, improved comfort or functionality.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's especially a challenge for like older buildings, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just like you can flip a switch and suddenly it's a smart building.
Right. Renovating existing buildings to meet those new standards can be really complex and expensive.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to make that feasible, that's a big hurdle. But despite the challenges, the potential benefits of all these smart technologies,
Yeah.
they're enormous. Imagine a building that could automatically adjust its energy consumption based on like real-time electricity prices.
Oh, wow.
Or a building that could like detect a fault in the heating system before it breaks down.
That would be amazing.
Right. So it's not just about saving energy, it's about making buildings more responsive and user-friendly.
Yeah, so it's like making them smarter and more efficient in like a bunch of different ways.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the Smart Readiness Indicator, the SRI,
Okay, the SRI.
which is designed to measure all of this stuff.
So how does it do that? What makes it so special?
Well, unlike those simple energy performance certificates, the SRI looks at way more factors.
Like what kind of factors?
Well, it doesn't just look at energy consumption. It considers things like how well a building adapts to the needs of the people inside and how it interacts with the energy grid.
So it's like a more holistic view?
Precisely. And it has a really interesting history. The SRI actually started back in 2017.
Oh, wow.
And that's when researchers were developing the methodology, and then it moved into a pilot phase where
Yeah.
they tested it out in real-world projects.
Interesting. So they like actually tested it out before just rolling it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure it was practical and effective, before implementing it more broadly.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's actually on track to become an official EU regulation.
Wow. So the EU is really serious about this.
Yeah, they see it as a crucial tool to push the whole building industry towards a more sustainable future.
Okay, now I'm really curious about like how does it actually work? How do they actually measure a building's smartness?
Yeah, so basically they break down the assessment into different domains.
Domain.
Yeah, like energy,
Which?
water, lighting, indoor air quality, all these different things.
How many are there?
There are 9 in total,
9. Okay.
but we don't need to go through all of them right now.
Okay.
But what's important is that each domain covers a specific aspect of a building's performance,
Mhm.
from, energy efficiency to occupant comfort to safety.
Okay. And then so within each domain, do they give it like a letter grade or something?
It's a little more sophisticated than that.
Okay.
So within each domain, you have different services with various levels of functionality.
Okay.
So for example, in the energy domain, you might have a service for smart EV charging.
So like having an outlet versus having like a really fancy system that charges your car when energy prices are low.
Exactly. So like a basic level might be just having a regular charging point, and a more advanced level would be having like intelligent charging that takes into account things like real-time energy prices and grid demand.
Okay, got it.
And each service gets scored based on its functionality level and how much impact it has on things like energy savings, comfort, or health.
Okay, so a building with like super advanced EV charging would get a better score than a building with just like a basic outlet.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then all those scores across the different domains, they all contribute to the building's overall SRI score, which gives you a clear picture of its smartness.
So it's not just about having a bunch of tech, it's about how that tech is used to actually improve things.
Exactly. And what's cool is that your source material actually has some real-world examples of this.
Oh, yeah.
Like the SRI training package for building owners. It highlights how smart EV charging can not only benefit the building owner, but also help balance the electricity grid.
Oh, wow. So a building could actually like contribute to a more stable grid.
Exactly. It's not just about individual buildings.
Yeah.
It's about how they can become part of a larger ecosystem.
That's really cool.
And while the SRI is becoming, quite popular, it's not the only game in town.
Oh, right. Like those technical papers you mentioned?
Yeah, exactly. Those documents like the 52120, Tessi plus Francesco plus Ligorio.pdf, and the Tessis Politecnico Torino 2023 download CARE P240502.pdf. They explore alternative methodologies for evaluating building automation,
Okay.
which can get pretty complex.
Yeah, those are some dense papers.
Yeah. But it's important to know that the field is constantly evolving. There's a lot of ongoing research and development.
So there are other smart people out there thinking about this stuff too.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this field so exciting.
Yeah.
There's always something new to discover.
Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to our listeners for a second.
Okay?
Like, why should they care about all of the smart building stuff and the SRI? What's the relevance for them in their everyday lives?
That's a great question. And to really answer that, we need to think about the listener's own context.
Okay.
What are their goals, their concerns, their current situation?
So, like, let's say our listener is a homeowner.
Okay.
And they're interested in making their house more efficient and comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also worried about the cost.
Right.
How could the SRI help them?
Yeah, that's a really common concern. And I think the SRI can actually be really helpful even at the individual homeowner level, because it provides a framework for thinking about which upgrades will give them the biggest bang for their buck.
So, like, instead of just going out and buying the fanciest thermostat,
Exactly.
you can use the SRI to figure out what's actually going to make a difference.
Right. It can help them understand things like how much energy they could save and what that translates to in terms of actual cost savings.
So it's like a decision-making tool.
Exactly. It takes the guesswork out of it, and it helps them prioritize the upgrades that align with their needs and their budget.
Okay, that makes sense.
And for someone who's maybe more involved in policy or building regulations, the SRI can be even more powerful
How so?
because it offers a standardized way to measure a building's intelligence. And that creates a foundation for creating really meaningful policies.
So instead of just having like a minimum energy efficiency standard, you could use the SRI to encourage the adoption of certain smart technologies.
Right. It helps us move beyond a narrow definition of energy efficiency
Hmm.
and think more holistically about building performance. And it allows policymakers to incentivize and reward those buildings that are not just efficient, but also adaptable, comfortable, healthy, for the occupants.
Yeah, so it's not just about saving energy, it's about creating a better experience for people too.
Exactly. And it's a really important point.
Okay, so we've talked about the SRI, we've talked about the challenges of smart buildings, but there's this other term that keeps popping up in the source material, and that's digital twins.
Ah, yes, digital twins.
So what exactly are those, and how do they fit into this whole smart building puzzle?
That's a great question and a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so digital twins, what are those?
Yeah, so a digital twin, imagine like a virtual replica of a building, a digital model that basically mirrors its physical counterpart in real time.
So like if a pipe bursts in the real building, I could see that happening in the digital twin.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And it's not just a static model.
Oh.
Digital twin uses data from all sorts of sensors throughout the building, as well as like external factors like weather patterns to create a dynamic living simulation.
So it's constantly updating.
Yeah, it's constantly learning and evolving.
So like what can you actually do with a digital twin? Is it just like a cool visual thing, or are there like real practical applications?
So there are tons of practical applications.
Yeah.
One of the papers you sent over, the GBC Italia position paper basis, bemsweb.pdf,
Yeah.
goes into this in detail. They talk about using digital twins to monitor building performance in a way that we've never been able to before.
Oh, wow.
Like you can identify inefficiencies that you might not even notice otherwise.
So it's like having X-ray vision for your building.
Exactly. You can see what's working well and what needs attention. And you can even run simulations.
Oh, really?
What if we add solar panels to the roof? What if we change the ventilation system? The digital twin can help you predict the impact of those decisions.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're not just reacting to problems, you're like preventing them before they even happen.
Right. It's all about being proactive and optimizing the building's performance.
And this GBC Italia paper, it also mentions that digital twins can like revolutionize the way we design and build buildings in the first place.
Absolutely. Having that virtual model from the get-go, it allows for much more collaborative design.
Yeah, I can see how that would be helpful.
Architects, engineers, everyone can see the impact of their decisions in real time, and that helps prevent costly mistakes down the line.
So you're like building the building virtually before you even break ground?
Exactly. It's like a virtual sandbox for innovation.
This is like really blowing my mind. Like buildings aren't just static structures anymore. They're becoming like these intelligent, adaptable organisms.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's really an exciting time to be involved in this field.
So with all this amazing technology, there has to be some downsides, right? Like what are some of the potential pitfalls?
Well, of course, like with any technology, there are challenges. And I think one of the biggest concerns with smart buildings is data privacy and security.
Yeah, that makes sense. If our buildings are collecting all this data about us, we need to make sure it's being protected.
Absolutely. We need clear regulations and safeguards to prevent that data from being misused.
So it's not just about making buildings smart, it's about making them smart responsibly.
Right. And another challenge is the complexity of these systems.
Yeah.
Installing, managing, maintaining all this technology, it requires specialized expertise.
Which can be expensive.
Yeah, and it can be a barrier for some building owners, especially those who aren't that tech savvy.
Right, because like keeping up with all the latest advancements and making sure everything is working properly, that can be overwhelming.
It definitely can be. There's a learning curve, for sure. And that's why education and training is so important, not just for the people who install and maintain these systems, but also for the people who live and work in the buildings.
Because a smart building is only as smart as the people using it.
Right, exactly. If people don't know how to use the technology or they're not comfortable using it, it defeats the purpose.
So it's about more than just providing a user manual. It's about designing intuitive systems and providing ongoing support.
Right, and it's about creating a culture where people feel empowered to give feedback and suggestions.
So it's like a two-way street.
Exactly. It's a partnership between the technology and the people using it.
This is really making me rethink the whole concept of a building. It's not just a physical space anymore. It's like a dynamic ecosystem.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's a really important shift in mindset.
It seems like the future of buildings is not just about technology. It's about human-centered design.
Exactly. It's about understanding how people interact with their environment.
And creating spaces that are not just efficient, but also inspiring.
That's the goal.
I'm starting to see a bigger picture here. It's not just about geeking out over gadgets and data.
No.
It's about using technology to make our lives better and create a more sustainable future.
And a more equitable future as well.
That's a really good point. I think after getting into all the technical stuff, it's good to remember the human side of it all.
Absolutely. And as we move forward, we need to keep that human-centered perspective at the forefront of our minds.
Now that we've gone deep on the tech side, I'm curious, what's the most important takeaway you want our listeners to leave with today?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the true measure of a building's smartness is not just about how much technology it has, but how effectively that technology is used to improve the lives of the people inside it.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about the tech specs, it's about creating a better experience for everyone.
Exactly. And that future is being shaped right now by the choices that we make as individuals, communities, and as a society.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
We do, and the possibilities are endless. I'm really excited to see what we can achieve together.
That's a good point. It is easy to get lost in like all the gadgets and data.
It is.
But ultimately, it's about the impact on people's lives.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And the good news is that all this smart building technology, it really has the potential to make our lives better. You know, we're talking more comfortable spaces, more energy efficient buildings, healthier buildings, safer buildings.
Yeah, and it's not just about like a single building by itself, right?
No, not at all.
Like this idea of a smart city is kind of mind-blowing.
It is. It really is. Imagine a future where all the buildings in a city can talk to each other.
Wow.
Share data, coordinate their energy usage.
Yeah.
You know, to create a more resilient and sustainable environment.
It makes you wonder what cities will be like in like 50 years.
Will we even recognize them?
Yeah.
It's exciting to think about all the possibilities. And the best part is we're not just watching this happen. We all have a role to play in shaping this future.
So this deep dive has been really interesting for me, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling pretty inspired too.
I hope so.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to learn more about this topic and maybe even get involved?
I would say just stay curious. There's so much information available online in your community. You know, attend workshops, connect with experts, visit smart buildings in your area.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's great advice. And you don't have to be like a tech expert to be part of this conversation, right?
Not at all.
Like whether you're a homeowner, a renter, a student, a policymaker, your voice matters. Your perspective matters.
Absolutely. This is about creating a future that works for everyone.
Yeah.
And that takes all of us working together, learning and sharing ideas.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the technical details of smart buildings to the bigger picture implications.
We have.
It's been a really great deep dive.
It has. It's been a pleasure discussing this with you and with our listeners.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of smart buildings. We hope you learned something new and that you're feeling inspired to learn more and maybe even get involved. Remember, keep exploring, stay curious, and never stop asking questions. Until next time.